I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to a number of people about the program, which is very exciting. I want to start by actually talking about challenges, because I think out of challenges is where comes programming and new opportunities. And one of the challenges in being the only staff person in Pennsylvania and a single office on the far side of the state is that it's a very big state and that it's very hard to do networking around the state. And I wanted to say that one of the best networking programs that we ever did, and probably most impactful, was Eyes Wide Open. How important that program was, and I've had people who've told me outside of AFSC and friends that it was probably one of the most influential programs for stopping the war that happened. And one of the opportunities that came out of there was that we actually reached 60 sites in Pennsylvania. We were able to travel around the state and build a state network, which unfortunately we haven't now got over the years, because it's been a while since we've done that. And that's one of the challenges, is how we build these networks. And so one of the programs that I am now working on, and let me say, one of the other challenges that comes out is that everything is thrown at you as a single person office. Everything is thrown. This issue is absolutely vital, and we need somebody from AFSC to be part of this program. But it also opens off opportunities. Luckily, I have a very, very strong committee that says constantly to me, no, or if you're going to do this, what are you going to lay down? But out of one of the work that I've been doing for a number of years is on the issue of torture. And that actually is one that AFSC was not involved in the beginning. And a number of years ago, and I can't remember how many, AFSC put together, and we were working on state-sponsored torture because it became so vital in the Bush years and has continued to be, and the environment that has been created that allows torture to happen. And a number of years ago, AFSC put on an extraordinary conference here in Philadelphia, which was the Stop Max conference, which unfortunately was then dropped. But it was about maximum security prisons. And by chance, I happened to, or maybe by providence, I happened to come to that, and was absolutely blown away to realize what was happening in our own country in terms of the use of torture in our prisons. And from that, my colleagues and I have been part of a process of getting some of the national groups that are working on this issue to, in fact, recognize that they cannot work on it nationally, internationally, if they are not, or statewide, they are not also looking at it in our prisons. And so there has, organizations like the National Conference on Peacemaking and Conflict Resolution have now taken this up, as has the Quaker Initiative Against Torture. And I'm the representative from AFSC to NERCAT, to the National Religious Campaign, and on the planning committee of the Quaker Initiative. So this has become a very important part of my work. And in terms of, that was opportunity that came to me, that it just was imperative that I expanded into. But the other part was that at the same time, it was a networking opportunity. And so last year, AFSC brought together folks from around the state. I have to tell you that, and we brought them from around the state for a conference in Harrisburg on the only time when we had snow in the entire winter, which was in October, and they had 7 inches. So, but it was an incredibly good conference, and out of that has become a planning committee to, in fact, address at state level, because this is where it has to start, the issue of solitary confinement in our prisons. And our prisons, while we don't have maximum security prisons in Pennsylvania, our prisons are in incredible condition, and some of the abuse that's going on there is devastating. And so this has become a very important part of my work, which I'm not going to focus on as much today. But I just wanted to make people aware that that is happening, and there are a number of us who are in our organization who are working on this in different states, which is very exciting, so there's beginning to be a network. What I actually wanted to talk about mostly today came again out of this, one of these, you have to do this, and this was forced on me, I guess, by my youth. I've had a youth program for 2 years, which is a racial justice through human rights youth group, which is focusing, we're working on human rights, and out of that, with that rubric comes the focus to some extent on racial justice. Because it's inevitable that when you look at your human rights, you see both economic and racial injustices that are happening. And the group has been, I've had most of the same group for 2 years. And the first year we worked to get Pittsburgh declared a human rights city, which in itself was an interesting, it was the 5th human rights city in the US. It was an interesting process, but we never felt it was the end. We always felt that it was an umbrella under which we could go to City Council and say, look, you're failing. This is not, you're not abiding by the human rights we really believe in, and you need to do more in this area. And our City Council was very responsive to this, and we had this big celebration, which was very nice. But in this second year, the focus really became education. And that's what I want to talk about today. The youth basically moved us into the whole area of education because they were really seeing this as crucial. And before, I want to show a video in a second, but what I want to say before that is that of my 13 original youth, 7 schools have now been closed. So this is a reflection on our school system. And I will be talking about Pennsylvania, but my guess is that I'm really talking about the whole country in terms of the education. So what I'd like to do is show the video. This is a video that they have put together. What we did was, when it became clear that this was going to be the focus of their work, we got the youth media advocacy group to help us do this video, and they have actually sponsored it, which was wonderful. This is actually a trailer. We felt that it was very necessary to do this video, to get something in place before Corbett's, our governor's budget, because that had to be, that was very crucial, that it was visible and out there, and it was the voices of the students, and that's what we wanted to really focus on. So this is a trailer. We will be doing a full half-hour video, which is just being produced now, and that will be, there'll be a big forum to present that in the fall, and it'll be used in various groups.
I think education is a really basic human right that everyone in the world should have the right to go to school and to learn and to feel safe while doing it. When I walk down the halls, I can tell by looking in a classroom, I can tell by the racial breakdown of that classroom what track it is. And that's pretty much the most disgusting thing I can think of.
I think that education, it shouldn't have anything to do with race. Education should be about sitting a kid in the room and teaching them and making sure that they have all the things that they need to go on to a higher level of education.
The whole notion of public education and opportunity for all citizens was one of the pillars of this form of government that we have. Unfortunately, the public education system in the country, and certainly in Pennsylvania, has not always proven to be the great equalizer.
Most kids want to be big people in the world, but they're not going to be able to do stuff like that if they don't have the resources.
The last time we measured students for furniture was probably the 1950s. When's the last time we changed the classroom? I teach in a school that has a tremendous amount of resources versus going to other schools in the city. Some schools are not even on the same planet.
I've been in classes where there's not enough books for every student, there's not enough desks. But then also when I look at a lot of the other city schools, it's not too bad.
Some people don't understand like the reality of schools being shut down, it hurts. I mean, like I cry about it, and like I'm getting emotional now, but it hurts to have your school closed because it feels like people don't care about you.
I visited other high schools and they've had materials and books and things that we don't have, and you feel when you go to other schools that their education's better.
I work in, the high school that everybody sees when they do documentaries for, dangerous high schools. Except I also work with some of the most amazingly cool kids in the world. And the only thing that stops them from having a great life is opportunity. And what stops them from getting that opportunity is their zip code.
I think my experience would be better if I was recognized more for the outstanding job that I do in school. I don't really get that a lot.
I hardly know anything about city schools, and the only reason that I do know things about them and the problems that they have and the challenges that the kids face every day is because I talk to those kids.
So many times a student could live on this side of the street and be in a community and a neighborhood and a school district that has pretty good resources. But if you happen to live on the other side of the street, you may be in a different town and a different school district that might be much poorer.
When the budget cut, it took the teachers that, I would say the teachers that meant something, that they've been there for a while.
There was a lot of teachers there. There was at least 3 Spanish teachers. There was a lot more music teachers. There was, it was just, the school was filled up with teachers.
Going toward 10th and 11th, we got brand new teachers and it was a mess.
But this year there's been a huge cut. You don't know what you got until it's gone, and that's how I feel.
Societally, there's a breakdown in the confidence that people have that education is going to provide what is promised. I think that if things were more equitable and if education was a clear route to success, then I think that more people would take advantage of it.
When I learned about the civil rights movement in school, and you learn about how many people fought just so like different groups of people could sit in the same classroom and learn the same things in an equal setting, and then you think about today and how unequal it is, and people just, I don't think they're noticing that. I think like we're just taking a large step back, and we should be moving forward.
So that's my wonderful set of youth. And the interesting thing about this group is that it's very diverse. So when we actually got to talking about schools, we had youth who were from private schools, from city charter schools, from suburban schools, from small towns, and from inner city, both schools that had a decent education system and those that were all African American and were really suffering. So the diversity helped, and it was only shown a little bit in this. When we do the full video, you will really see the diversity. So I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about what's happening to our education system in Pennsylvania, and most of the people here are in Pennsylvania, and so but I suspect that we're looking at this everywhere. There was a really interesting article it was done in the Delaware Times on our, and I just want to read a couple of things. That Corbett has slashed $1 billion over 2 years from our education system. and that we now rank 45th out of 50 states in terms of state funding for education. And the public education, and what we've now got, I mean, we sort of felt like we got a budgetary, maybe that we did well, but what we have is now a flat system. And there is no increased funding for education, which is a major, issue, because this, you know, I know our local system is not picking that up. In recent released survey of Pennsylvania school districts conducted by the Pennsylvania Association of School Administrators and Pennsylvania School Board Association, just during 2011 and 12, 50% of Pennsylvania school districts have cut instructional programs, 70% have increased sizes of classes, 44% have cut programs in elective areas such as foreign languages, art, music, and physical education. 41 have delayed purchases of textbooks, and 58 have backed away from computer purchases. Additionally, 8,365 school positions have been eliminated. And in Pittsburgh alone, we have eliminated 500 positions, which I think is 280 staff. And so our education system we're in dire issues, and this is what our youth really was seeing in a way that I was just incredibly impressed with. Further, of course, in Pennsylvania, we have just given this, we're in the process of giving this huge tax break to Shell for the cracker. People aware of this? The Associated Press reported that the Senate Bill 1466 will allow for a limitless 25-year tax break beginning in 2017 for a PA petrochemical refinery and chemical manufacturing industry. So in terms of our education, we're really struggling. So I wanted to raise these issues, and what I would actually like is to have a little discussion here, because I think that all of us are seeing this, and as we go forward with trying to present this to statewide in an election year, I would be very interested in what others are seeing and in Philadelphia, which I'm not as familiar with how the cuts are impacting us here as well. So I would like actually to open this up to an open discussion, and online as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Could I ask a question about
absolutely,
the
yes.
in the group? As you work with them, what are the tools you use for them to do their research, and how does that translate into what they believe they can take as action steps?
Well, we start with the youth program. We start by doing a curriculum, a learning curriculum, which has a number of components to it. It has a human rights learning, so they understand the human rights aspect of it. It has an understanding of nonviolence and violence and how social change movements work, and then how and so we're putting together. And how community and the consensus process. So we're putting together a basis for them to actually then go and do a project of part of. In terms of the research, for the actual education stuff, they didn't need to do any research. There was research that was done, and which was why we brought in people who had expertise in the education field to talk to them. But they had, what we wanted very definitely from them was their practical knowledge of what was actually happening in the schools. And Ron Cowell, the speaker, what he wanted was that message from the youth voices. And that has been incredibly important, because so many of the talks and the presentations are being done by adults about what's happening to the youth. And so the youth voices are a very, very important part of the message that's being sent forward. And so we wanted them definitely to speak entirely from their own experience, and they could do what research. I mean, when we do the full one, there'll be statistics, and so the full video there'll be statistics, but that doesn't. It only enhances what is what they have had and what they've gone through. So that's important. So I would be interested to know what Philly is going through, if anybody knows.
Well, definitely reductions in both Catholic schools as well as public schools here. And I did a little bit of work over this past year with the Department of Labor on these persistently dangerous school grants. I'm not quite sure why they had it. But 11 schools in Philadelphia were grantees, and so I had an opportunity to spend time both in those schools while they were waiting to kind of hear which schools got cut. And it was a kind of a life-changing experience for me, just in terms of a lot of the, what's described by the students there, just the utter chaos and teachers struggling with students, fights in between classes, and so the thought then of losing more teachers and more schools is just hard to imagine, because they were barely kind of hanging on, and that was this past year. So.
And I know in Pittsburgh we as they said, we have become totally, to a large degree, it has become segregated, back to segregation again. The school that the young woman Raven, who was explaining about her school, the closing, they closed a neighborhood school, and they shipped them to two areas where no whites would ever go, to schools in two areas where whites would never go. In their last year, they cut them off to cold turkey. And then brought into their school, about to bring into their school, a international baccalaureate school. So that, of course, is biracial. And so the blatant racism that is part of this is of real concern in Pittsburgh. So that's been an important part of their struggle. Yes?
There's definitely been a lot of research on Philly schools in terms of how disparities are playing out with the choice system that's grown exponentially in the last 10 years. But Philly has also really contracted student base to the size of number of facilities and seats they have available, which I understand is similar in Pittsburgh. Like the closing of schools is also driven by facility management and stuff like that. So the district here has been struggling to roll out a facilities master plan for a really long time and has not been able to. And before all these cuts, they also, you probably know about like the basically golden parachute they had to pay out to the former superintendent. So like the last superintendent who left, they had a huge payout to her, and so that was right before all the cuts. So the district's in basically total disarray, budget crisis, but that's kind of just considered, I think, run of the mill around here from prior work. I did a research project on the Philadelphia public schools in a previous job, and that was that we looked at 10 years of the schools and what was going on and the changes in gross terms of how students have been moving across district, charter, and Catholic schools. So there's pretty persistent problems, but there is a need to close schools just fundamentally from facilities management, and they have way too many seats. But it's always very challenging to do because there's so many other layers of dynamics, and it's a neighborhood asset as well as a place. But fundamentally, they have way too many seats in this district. They just the costs are unbearable. So.
Can I ask about class
Yes.
size?
Yeah.
Well, what are the class sizes then? Like when all the schools closed, Scilla, in Pittsburgh, did the class size go exponentially higher per teacher?
Well, one of the things that's happened is white flight, which I'm assuming that Philadelphia has too. So we're now looking at, but yes, the class size are going up to 33, 35. In the Montessori school, they were saying that they had 33 students in the first years, and only one teacher in the early. I can't remember what the first grade anyway. The kindergarten, I think it was, and so class sizes. But it's not just that. What they have done is they're equalizing the programs, and so they are. Everybody gets 1 day of library, 1 day of art, 1 day of music, and maybe a bit of a gym. But one of the issues and so you know, each of the schools is being, some are being depleted and nothing is adequate. One of the issues that some of my students were one of my students was dealing with was that she was actually only taking 3 classes in a day. That they were giving them long classes focused on the 3 main, the 3 main subjects. So because that school was failing, and that was boring. You know, instead of having the variety, she was getting this and not very good instructions. And so that was incredibly challenging for them, that her whole life she felt was just this monotonous continuation. And there are so many issues that these young folks are facing, and it's so close, they are so, at this age, they're so close to being vulnerable for boredom, being upset, being angry with the school system because it isn't fulfilling their needs, and they are then vulnerable to doing things which put them into the track for prison, which is very scary. One of the kids had a roach in her backpack, and got sent to the reform school, even though she was an excellent student. And even though the teachers then intervened, the security system, once she goes into the hands of the security system, nobody has any control over what happens to her. The school cannot say. So she was, the danger was already that she was tracked into the school that is considered the reform school, and then that possibility is of the next step is, particularly for young males, is the whole prison system. Yes.
I'm not too familiar with Philadelphia schools, but I did AmeriCorps in Seattle, and I was a reading tutor. And the school that I had worked at for a year, they actually ended up closing after. I think it's a similar situation. But my AmeriCorps team, we were given a statistic, and I don't remember exactly, but it was something about 3rd grade reading scores are used to calculate future prison beds for how many more they'll need. And so working as a reading tutor, I worked with K through 3, and we were told that up through 3rd grade is about like the mechanics of like learning how to read. Beyond that, it's about comprehension. So if you haven't gotten those skills and you don't know how to do what you're meant to do, then you can't comprehend anything, and then you just kind of skim along. And the students I was working with, they're all primarily English as a second language, so they were also working with that as well. It was really difficult. I mean, there were things like, in the winter when I had colds, and I asked the secretary at school, where's the supply closet? I need tissues for the room. And she says, oh, that's, if you need tissues, you need to get them. So, I had to go out and buy tissues, and I was doing AmeriCorps. It's not like I had tons of funds. So I used to bring in tissues and snacks for the kids and stuff. And just, they're really struggling, and we hear about the good schools, and those are all the private schools in the community, and that's where students would go,
So,
if the parents would afford it.
right, so yes, so that whole issue of being tracked already. I mean, one of the youth actually, he wasn't there that day, but he actually is illiterate. He's graduating from high school this year, but he's illiterate. So his potential, which is the next thing, of course, is for finding jobs, and where these youth go next is, or there's no college possibility at all for him. The jobs are not there. So we're perpetuating a situation in which I'm not quite sure where his choices are. What I do know, what one of his choices is military, which is not a good choice. Obviously, we want to. So it's just, this is really important stuff, because the education, I think, although we're talking about our schools, we don't see how failing they are and how at risk our whole generation is, into how easily it is for these very vulnerable. I figure that my 17 and 18-year-olds are easily as vulnerable as 2 or 3-year-olds, in that it's so easy for them to move from where they are and not have the support and the needs into the situation in which they are going to land up in jail. So yeah.
Yeah, in Pittsburgh, since you've been involved in the education system for a while, have you thought about, or do you have any ideas of what needs to happen in order to improve the education system there? I mean, what can happen in order to change the situation that can make it better, or to make it? Are there any choices for these kids, or are there any parent associations? I mean, what is it money? Is money allocated in different ways in the Pittsburgh city system, or what?
Well, I think that the money, a large degree, that needs to come statewide, and that's where we are really are failing. I mean, it's very interesting. I'll go back to the actual improving schools. It's very interesting that West Virginia actually has a surplus at the moment. And I don't think people realize that. And the reason they have a surplus is because they are actually taxing their fracking. Well, I don't happen to want fracking at all, but if I'm going to have fracking, which obviously I don't have any choice at this point, at least I want to tax it. And I certainly don't want to be giving money away to oil companies that are destroying our environment, which we are in Pennsylvania at the moment. I mean, money is my youth tell me all the time, money is not the answer, but at least money for the schools would be a huge help. I mean, not cutting schools' budgets, is because then we can supply some of the supplies. But I think a whole, in terms of the schools, we've got to relook at the whole system and revamp it in the way that we are teaching our students. I mean, we cannot teach them to tests, and we cannot, it just isn't going to work. And there has to be a way of hopefully recapturing some of those that are going to influence what type of schools we're getting. Something else I was going to say in terms of the parents, it's very tough. I mean, one of the schools that is closing, 3 of my kids are part of that school system, are now moving to an area where there is the parents just can't get to the schools. So you can't have the parent influence. They'd have to take a couple of buses. So and many of some of these parents are working, single moms working long hours, and just coming back at 7, 8 at night, and supervision of, I can't blame the parents, because it's very tough. Although some of them are struggling. I think there needs to be just an awareness and a rising up of people's concerns about the education. I don't think it's and I haven't been in the concerned about education for very long. It's literally my youth has said to me, you've got to do this because, and most of those are graduating, so they weren't ones that needed to care about what was happening, but they basically said this is what we're looking at, and so we really do need to focus on the whole on this issue. And so I promised them we would continue to raise these, I don't have the answers. I really don't. White flight has been major, and the charter schools have eaten into considerably. I mean, I'm not totally against charter schools, but they've certainly eaten into the budgets, and they are an escape mechanism for those that are inspired to do that. And the other thing is Pittsburgh has just put in a cyber school, which I think is doing it online. I think it's disastrous. I've got one student who she has just gone from A's down to E's, and she is, so the charter school she's in will be won't let her come back, and she's talking about doing cyber, which means that she's isolated by herself trying to get an education. It's not going to work, and it's not going to work. So I think we've got to start by just being aware of the issues and raising them wherever we can, and we've got an election year coming up in which this is going to be a crucial part of the work that we were doing. One of the opportunities that my youth had was we were part of the If I Had $1 Trillion video program that AFSC sponsored. So, and we were one of those that was chosen. And so 3 of my youth got to go to DC, and they got to lobby their congressional representatives. And I was very proud of them because they started off with Senator Casey, they only got to talk to the aides, which wasn't bad, and they could talk to him. But then they landed up with Toomey, who of course is the most conservative that they can possibly, and the aide they sent in was really not prepared for these youth. And it was a joy to see them hold him down and not let him get away with generalities, and really sort of be able to present their concerns. They showed the video that they had done on, not this one, but on If I Had $1 Trillion, and that was very impactful. So that was a wonderful opportunity, which AFSC has made available. So that was an exciting part of that. So.
I was just going to say to Natalie's point that Governor Corbett is building new prisons and had appropriated,
that's right.
Was it $880 million, something like that, to build, I think, 4 new prisons and to build onto Graterford State Prison. So yes. I'm sure that those types of calculations went into the planning.
This is another challenge for AFSC staff that you see when you start working with these youth, and you see the direction that, you see these choices and you see what's happening to the prison system. And you know that that once they get into that system, they are basically going to they're never going to be able to enter society in the same way again. That it's hard not to, in fact, see that as another important part of the work. We need about 20 staff in Pennsylvania alone.
I think what you were saying before about the alternative schools as being this place that, like, there's a big link there between this pipeline to education and prison. I think that really worries me because those schools are so unregulated. Like, there's been at least some public debate about, in this state, the regulation of charter schools and how it's very, very uneven and the oversight is, very questionable. But the alternative schools, it's all, outsourced private providers, and there's basically no oversight.
Right. Well, and even the charter schools, that they keep the cream. If a student is not passing, they have the ability to send them back into the public school system. So the public school system is inevitably landing up with those that have the most challenges to stay in the system. And what I discovered recently is that the counselors for the public school actually have to counsel the charter school system, the charter school kids. That's another drain on their time, which they're not spending with their own students. Dick, you're going to ask him.
I've been obsessed over the last couple of years with the notion of collective impact, of gathering groups together. What would you say is the state of coordination and combined advocacy efforts across Pennsylvania addressing the education system and its problems?
I don't know that it's that good, and it's part of the reason that I am interested in others, in particular in understanding where it's coming from Philly. I know that Good Schools was doing a lot of advocacy a while ago, which I think that their funding has pretty much in Pittsburgh it's gone. And there has been a few groups that have gone up to, they did some lobbying when the budget was coming up. But I don't know, and in some ways I'm coming into this education field fairly recently, and it's something that I think I would love to see some sort of statewide issues around that, because I think it's crucial in terms of trying to get some funding and so on. I mean, I think there is some, but it's not as extensive as I would like to see it.
I mean, I talk about education all the time with my children in it, but isn't it in some ways a symptom of a larger problem of us not knowing what the role of government really is anymore, and an erosion of trust in any public institution that is partly the drumbeat from the right wing that wants to go back to the Gilded Age, but the whole privatization of for-profit prisons and for-profit schools, it's been a concerted, organized effort over 20, 30, 40 years to gradually build this deterioration of public trust in institutions in interest of for-profit taking over of functions that ought to be legitimate government functions in a stable and secure society. So education is part of that, its deterioration, the attack on teacher unions, the deterioration of respect for the profession of teachers, the lack of investment in working conditions and training and valuing of the profession. I mean, there's so many complex pieces of it that where does it all come from, and how do we reverse it?
Absolutely, and education is, as you say, is just a tiny little piece of it. I just want to read you because this is a lovely little quote. It said, "My advice to Pennsylvanians is don't get old, don't get sick, don't try to educate your kids, don't be unlucky enough to be disabled, don't try to find a job, don't try to catch a bus, and don't try to find a non-deficient bridge." This was Representative Joe Marcosa of Allegheny County. So it was just a little sideline. but it's hard because I'm looking at education, but when we're looking at the whole AFSC, economic justice is any part of that we should be looking at. I mean, I don't have the answers clearly, but nobody in AFSC does yet. In how we change this environment in which we've got, which is the privatization environment, I think we're all struggling with in terms of both the peace and wage peace and economic justice. Getting into education was, I say, thrust upon me, and it's one small aspect of this work. But the advantage is that when we look at the youth and when they have a voice, that highlights some of the problems that others can then see very realistically, and I think that's an important part of moving the discussion forward. We do care about our kids, and we do care about them getting the education, and I think people do recognize that when we have bad schools, that what we're going to land up with is there's this competition side to the US that we have to keep up with the world. So I think it is an access. You can't. It's very hard to work on prisons because that's their fault. It's an issue we have to work on, but that's another. But our children are something that we all treasure. So it's a way into, I think, some of the issues you're talking about. But I don't have the answers, folks. I'm just trying to work this system. Any other thoughts on? So we're going to, what we will be doing with the main video, and I hope that there are opportunities also to possibly show it at this side of the state, is to bring together a forum which will discuss this and start to find ways to get it out. And say, in an election year, this is an opportunity for people really to think about where our money is going, and what you were talking about, Dick, is the privatization of everything, and start to lead that discussion forward, which we have to have in a nice open place, and any way we can. There was one other thing I did want to say, and that is that in Pittsburgh there is a group, A+ Schools, which is actually undermining some of the union of the teachers' unions, which is unfortunate. They want to fire people by proficiency, looking at the proficiency of teachers, and it's been a real issue. The undercutting of the unions has been a fairly major issue in Pittsburgh, and I don't know if that's elsewhere as well, which is inevitable. So, yeah, Peter.
I'm wondering, as you're finishing the larger film, are
Yes.
you going to, have you challenged people to come up with recommendations for the end of the film, like a couple of the...
I believe there is. Wasn't in on the interviews, but I think that each person was asked what their view of what should be done was, and I'm certainly hoping that will be in there. And then we will have a panel which will discuss this and present, so that others will get a chance to also talk about what they feel is the most the important things that could happen, and certainly hope that there'll be some inspiration coming out of the room. So, yeah.
Well, it feels, like the recommendations always feel a little more right-sized when you hear from students. Like when you hear recommendations from think tanks, sometimes I think it just becomes, the framing becomes so challenging.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
They see things.
Fall off a cliff, so you're like, I'm ready to fall.
And they see things in a very different light from the way that we see them. It was very interesting having a discussion on affirmative action with my students, and they don't believe in affirmative action. I found myself, we were doing a grid, and I found myself on the far side fighting for affirmative action, and they were all saying, I want to be recognized by my merits. I do not, and I don't, and I don't want, that's how I want to be recognized. And I realized that these youth have been raised in a very different environment from the civil rights era, and they want to be recognized for who they are and what they are, and that was a real eye-opener for me. So they have a very different take on issues than we do. So that was.
There there are occasional successes. Rick Wilson last week was able to shame the governor of West Virginia to restore subsidies for low-income parents for childcare so they can actually work.
Fabulous. And yes, Rick is amazing what he's been able to do in West Virginia, and I just wish that Pennsylvania is it's a tough sell, folks, and we've got a long way to go and a lot of struggle ahead of us. So, yeah, it's so we've all got to be working in here. So if people know of opportunities for showing the video, that would be a wonderful way to raise interest here and to be able to walk forward. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.